with us here today some of the finest people involved in this effort, raising awareness, looking after the people who look after the earth, us, and also our landscapers and the people that work on it with us. And without further ado, let me just introduce everyone. To my left is Mayor LaRocca, Jim LaRocca. He's the mayor of Sag Harbor. This is renowned author, Carl Safina, an explorer and scientist, and what? And jazz drummer, yeah, baby. And Lena Gongal, our host, without whom this panel would not be possible. And then we have Bob. Rick, I'm so sorry. Rick Bogush. I'm meeting some of these people for the first time. It's my honor. Paul Wagner, and he's the head of Bridge Gardens, which if you haven't been, is an extraordinary, beautiful place. Paul Wagner of Green Pastures Organics. And then we have Paul Munoz, who is the chair of the East Hampton Sustainability Community. Thank you so much for joining us today. And then at the very end is Marianne Lindberg, who is with the Nature Conservancy and who has been working hard for years on this. So please welcome everyone. And our first speaker will be a jazz drummer.
Okay, I'm going to start very close, very, very close, and then go very, very, very big picture. Assuming this works, but now it's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, if anybody here has a dog, you've probably asked yourself the question, does my dog really love me or does she just want a treat? And you can easily see just by looking at those sweet little eyes that they really love us, right? Although maybe not. Maybe you can't really tell how they really feel. But something's going on in those beautiful little heads. It's not like nothing's going on in there. Maybe they do love us. But here's the thing, do you love me is a question about me and my insecurity. It's not really a question about you. So I needed a different question. And the question became, who are you? That opens a door. We all have these capacities of the human mind. The question is, are these capacities of only the human mind? What else is going on this planet in the other brains that share this world with us? For a long time, scientists said nothing is going on. Or they said that's not a scientific question because you can't get in. Well, actually you can get in. You can think about evolution. You can consider the logic of what they're doing. You can look at brains themselves. These are brains. This is how evolution works. They're all related. We are all organic relatives. We all come from the same place. We are all one living family, and our imperatives are exactly the same. In the broad strokes, find enough food to stay alive, try to keep your babies alive. That's the arc of all of our lifetimes. And even though we are shaped differently on the outside, inside, we're almost identical. We have the same nervous system, the same organs. And the flippers of a whale are exactly the same 5 finger bones, 5 sets of fingers that you have in your hand. We think that we are not very related, or unrelated, or distantly related. But in the history of life on Earth, these little cosmetic changes happened so recently that almost everything about us was already set before those differences happened. So under the skin, we are all kin. And we see things that are very recognizable, like helping when our babies need help, or exploring the world, especially when we're young, or loving between our children and our parents. There are plenty of other creatures in the world who are trying to learn how to live and must learn how to live. And where do they learn how to live? First, they learn from their mothers, who show them how you get along in the world. Some of my favorite birds are seabirds, and the extreme seabirds are albatrosses. They're extremely devoted parents. They often fly for 5,000 miles over periods of 2 or 3 weeks to come back with one meal for a chick that's waiting at the nest. They nest on extraordinarily isolated parts of the world, like right where that pin is, that's Laysan Island, and those are Laysan albatrosses. That's as far from a continent as you can get. That's what it looks like. We don't think about them. They feel us every day. After they go 5,000 miles, they come back to feed their chicks, and they feed them plastic, because plastic smells like food to them. All of them have plastic in them now. This chick was about 5 months old and ready to fly and died. It was packed with red cigarette lighters. That is not the relationship we're supposed to have with the world. But it is a relationship we have, because we've named ourselves Homo sapiens, the wise humans. We're very impressed with ourselves, but we don't think about the consequences of what we do. We think we're very special and very unique. So is a lot of other things that live here. And we're not the only ones for whom life matters, or for whom the closest ones around us matter. We're not the only ones who feel love and affection. And when we are about to welcome new humans into the world, we paint animals on the nursery room walls. We don't paint cell phones. We don't paint microwave towers. We paint animals. I think we do this sort of subconsciously, but I've wondered a lot, why do we paint animals of all the things we could paint? We could paint dinette sets, where we paint animals. I think we have a subconscious, deeply rooted wish for our unborn child, and that is, welcome to this beautiful world. We're not alone. We have company. But all of those animals in every painting you'll ever see of Noah's Ark, the ones that are deemed worthy of salvation by the Creator, they're all endangered now. And their flood is us. So I mentioned evolution earlier, and here's the story we're making of it. What goes around does come around. This is the story that we've told ourselves ever since the dawn of Western civilization. This is Aristotle's main story. There were other things alive on Earth, and we sort of left them behind. And they stayed there in the distant past somehow, and then we came and we're the only thing that really matters and we're better than everything else. That's the real story. Everything that's here has made the whole journey with us, changing in all the ways that it needs to change the whole time. And we're all here together. If you try to encapsulate the entire story of life on Earth, it immediately becomes completely mind-boggling. We don't really quite have the intelligence to understand where we're from, where life comes from, how long we've all been here, how life has proliferated. This is my favorite bird, the peregrine falcon. When I was 15 years old, this article appeared saying that this bird was doomed to go completely extinct. There was nothing that could be done because all their eggs were breaking because of DDT and the other hard pesticides. But a few people would not take that for an answer and insisted something must be done. And so they went to where there were a few remaining birds, they bred them in captivity. A few other people managed to get DDT banned. And when it looked like the environment was cleaning up, those birds from captivity went out into the wild. And that's why we have peregrine falcons now. And that's me. And it worked. Bald eagles were really on the ropes south of Canada, and now there are bald eagles nesting right here on the East End. They're back for very similar reasons. Ospreys were completely gone from almost the entire East Coast. There were maybe 2 or 3 nests left on Long Island. All the eggs were breaking, the birds were just dying off, and they're all over the place now because a few people said something must be done. Humpback whales were the first of the big whales that were protected. They are now so abundant you can literally take selfies with them. So I started out by asking if they love us, and we're going to just invert the question and ask, do we have the mental and emotional capacity to do what it takes to simply let life continue to exist on this only known living planet? Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand the floor, or the microphone, or whatever it takes, to Edwina von Gaal, who is really a leader, a national, international leader in how to have plants and gardens that not only beautify, but do no harm. Go ahead.
So I'm a plant. Excuse me, so now we're going to go into the world of plants. So what Carl's talking about is, of course, like major stuff. Great. So, but there is something that we can all do. So before you feel overwhelmed, you have to be Rachel Carson and write an international bestseller because the pesticides are still plaguing us. It didn't really go away. And now we have plastics and carbon and biodiversity loss and so many other things that are contributing to the problem. So, but actually, the bright side of this is, yes, there is actually a lot that you can do. And so recently I've been thinking about how to couch this in a message of immediacy, really, because we don't have a lot of time. We really don't. But so why not start now? And how does it look? So one of the things that I sort of came up with is a list of things that people probably haven't thought about in their landscapes and why it's important. And also every decision. So what Earth Equity is really about is about every
Talk a
single...
little closer to the...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, here you go.
Hold it up.
Okay, hold it up from a pro. Okay. So, you know, what everyone, whether you have a landscape or not, makes decisions that affects a multitude of life forms, all life forms, everything you do. So if someone is the CEO of a corporation and they decide that our corporate campus has to look a certain way, are they taking into account the fact that the people who are applying the chemicals that give that lawn that expansive sameness are exposing themselves to harmful chemicals, and not only in the application, but actually working out there. And so these are layers of unequitable choices that people are making without even thinking about it. It just isn't occurring to them. So I thought, how can I, starting with all of you, my community, start to bring these ideas to the forefront and ask our community, so that's why we have our mayor here today, to think about how does this factor in to all of the decisions we make on every level, municipal as well as personal, corporate, all of the various things. And actually, it's not restricting, it's actually quite free. So that just, if you approach a place with this do no harm, the reason it's free is that we have been taught by this complex and ever-tightening cycle of landscape care that tells us our landscapes have to look tidy. They have to be under your control. And so more and more our landscapes are treated the same as our living rooms because we don't know the names of any of those plants. We don't know who we're dealing with. And so it's the same. So what are you going to tell your landscaper? How are you going to tell them what you want if you don't know what you're talking about? That's the challenge. And so number one is both the landscape professional community and the consumer needs to be educated. What am I dealing with? But if you start simple and start with the fact that I need to know the names of these plants because you care about what you know about. And stop treating your landscape as if it were your interior. So that like one leaf, one something out of place, like, no, you don't want leaves on your living room rug. That would be out of place. But you don't know how to tell your landscaper, leave the leaves. Nobody knows how to do that. So Perfect Earth is here to help. But basically, here's the list of things that we're asking people to take into account. And it's really a challenge to me that I'm bringing to the people who are setting the example. So, you know, who are the influencers? The influencers are the church, you know. How is the church's landscape setting an example? People come, they see a nice landscape. But what does that landscape look like to a bird or an insect? Is there anything there for it to eat? Does it provide habitat? If we can get every single non-agricultural landscape in the United States to provide habitat, we will have turned the bird diversity crisis and the bird and the diversity crisis around. This is a tremendous amount of land which we have removed from ecosystem service. And we aren't planning on eating it. So why aren't we letting other life forms eat it? Why can we pay a landscaper to come, maybe chop off a third of the surface of a tree, turning it into a ball or a box? But if a bug shows up to nibble on a leaf, which will do actually less harm because he's not chopping and wounding the wood, well, that's not tolerable. We're not allowing that to happen. So does that really make sense? So questions to ask yourself about that. Why am I not sharing my landscape with nature? And why do I feel that it has to look like my living room? It should look like nature. And then you can relax. and then you can learn the names so you can sit in your chair instead of worrying about every little thing that is growing maybe out of line, and start to learn the names of the trees and the birds and the insects. So I'm gonna leave this, I'm gonna come back to this and leave it on the screen, so it's here while we do some further discussions. But this is what it can look like. This is a landscape that is designed for nature. And in the wintertime, these plants do not get cut back. They're there providing seed for the birds and cover, and that's where the insects, and then right now, we cut them back in the spring. You don't even have to, but most people would find that pretty messy. So, and I have a bird that visits every afternoon. And so this is in the winter. It's beautiful in the winter, but why do people feel that they need to chop everything down to the ground in the winter? So that there's no place for nature to actually overwinter happily. So we have just published as our gift to all of you for Earth Day, a leaflet that covers all the principles of earth-friendly landscape management. And it's on our website, and it's free, and it's paper-free. So please get a copy and go through it. It's in English and Spanish. And the idea is that it poses a lot of questions as well as provides a lot of answers. We would like everybody to start having this dialogue, and today is the beginning, thank you, April, to start talking about it. What I need to know, like, what do you think I'm asking of you that's just completely insane? Like, I'll never do that, I can't do that, that's ridiculous, like, I'm not going that far. Even if I'm telling you that all of these actions are pretty much critical, that like anything less than this is not a step towards saving biodiversity, which is now recognized as equally important as the carbon crisis, because they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So when you're thinking about designing a landscape, maintaining a landscape, or in any way administering a landscape, and you're thinking about yourself, that's more important than a decision that saves the earth, I'm wondering, can we talk about that? Because it's now a business model. It's a business model for landscape designers, and it's a business model for landscape contractors. And then the magazines publish those landscapes because they look tidy. And is that ethical? And that's where the earth equity comes in. Is it really ethical for us to continue to make landscapes that are drawing down the health of the earth? So back to, whoops, can you put that back up to full screen, or did I do something? Okay, so I'm just going to leave this up, and I'm going to introduce a special guest, because Perfect Earth is very happy we've now, one of the things that we're trying to do is to break down the silos between environmental organizations and all the organizations that are working towards saving the earth. But we've been working very independently. We brand ourselves, we promote ourselves, we raise money for ourselves. We have to stop working just for ourselves, and that's the whole thing. We need to start working all together, sharing resource, because we have a very big problem to solve, and the way we can do it best is by sharing resource and not duplicating it. So Chelsea Thatcher is here, and she's creative director of Grace Farms, which is our wonderful new collaborator. They're providing us with a place and a lot of assistance in terms of presenting events like this. And they have something called Design for Freedom, and she's going to tell you about it.
Thank you, Regina. So Seijima, Kazugo Seijima and Rui Ishizawa of the Pritzker Prize-winning firm Sana, sorry, excuse me, okay, that's great. Okay, of the Pritzker Prize-winning firm Sana. Real close. It says architecture acts as a catalyst, and that's super important. They say thinking about spatial structure is for us one of the most important steps in creating new relationships and new experiences. And to achieve this, each partner has a different instrument, and each plays a different song. And together, we create something new. So that's what we're doing here. Grace Farms is set on 80 acres of open space, and it's a place where peace takes shape because space and relationships matter at Grace Farms, and partnerships with Perfect Earth Project become that catalyst for good. So that's why Grace Farms Foundation and Perfect Earth Project are partnering together. We're shifting this paradigm towards biodiverse, nature-based solutions in our landscapes that are installed with materials that are free of forced labor and child labor. Really important. We're thinking about what's being planted in the landscape, but also what's being extracted from other parts of land to make our bricks. It becomes timber in our homes and in our landscapes, stone, and ultimately, and really being able to choose and question and caring about those ethical conditions. So you can learn a little bit more about Design for Freedom by coming, joining. You all have an invitation to join us at Grace Farms, May 26th, for Earth Equity and Design for Freedom landscapes. I also have Design for Freedom reports where you can learn about these materials that are vulnerable to forced labor that are all around us. And back to you.
It's in New Canaan. It's in New Canaan, and it's an incredibly beautiful place. And yeah, May 26th, we're going to do our first big event. So if you're on the Perfect Earth website newsletter, sign up, or please do, and you'll get some more information about that. So thank you, Chelsea. And, yeah, how about architecture being important? Like here we are in a perfect example of that. Such a great room. So I'm going to start out with that same question for my board here, and or my panel, I guess this is, about like, and I'd love actually for each of you just to talk very quickly about how each of you are incorporating these ideas into what you're doing, and which of them you think are going to present challenges, where you think they're important. And I know Marion and I have had a bit of a conversation about a big issue right now is whether or not to use glyphosate, which is better known as Roundup, for invasive species management. And this is a big question in the nonprofit and also municipal and statewide management planning. And it's not resolved. But the only way we're going to figure it out is through conversation, looking and constant analysis of the pros and cons. So, Mary, why don't I start with you, and we'll go down the line.
Sure, I'm going to hold this really close. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Happy to see
What's
all
your
of
mic
you.
like this, please?
Like this. Is that good? I'm Marion Lindbergh. When I came to work for the Nature Conservancy in 2005, after a career in law and journalism, I had a lot of enthusiasm to protect nature through land use decisions, especially land preservation transactions. And I also had a lot to learn. And Edwina quickly became one of my strongest allies and teachers, and also a myth buster. When the man at the end of my street told me, oh, you can't leave those leaves on the ground over the winter, they'll kill your grass. That was wrong. When my across the street neighbor told me, you can't leave those heaps of branches, they'll attract rodents. My landscaper told me that. He was wrong. And when renters want you to spray your backyard with tick spray, thinking that it will protect them from ticks, they're wrong. All these things and many more I've learned from Edwina, so you should listen to her. Thank you so much for many years of great advice. The Nature Conservancy has a pretty good history when it comes to not using chemicals. The first chair of the Long Island chapter, a world-famous pelagic bird expert, the head of the Natural History Museum's ornithology department, Robert Cushman Murphy, was the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit, the first lawsuit challenging the application of DDT. Now, DDT was used in the Pacific to help protect American soldiers from malaria-carrying mosquitoes. The soldiers came home, so did the DDT. And the federal government decided it would be good to use it on a large scale. They targeted 600,000 acres of Long Island in the 50s to spray DDT in a failed effort to eliminate the gypsy moth. So, and government agents said it's totally safe. Murphy saw the fish dying in his pond in Oakfield, begged to differ. He and others sued. The lawsuit failed, but it influenced Rachel Carson to write Silence Spring, and eventually did lead to the bans on DDT, which you heard about from Carl. Over time, ecologists did start using chemicals against invasive species when this became a very big problem. And a lot of talk about what landscapes are we really protecting and what is the right mix of species. Well, our beloved late director of the Nature Conservancy on Long Island, Nancy Kelly, put a stop to that about 10 or 12 years ago. She said, no more chemicals. And at this point, invasive species are part of the landscape. We can't necessarily say what's the right mix of species. We can't stop it on most of these on our preserves. So no more will the Nature Conservancy use anything to curb invasive species. If you want to, you can cut it, you can cover it, you can dig it, but you can't spray it. She was too concerned about water quality and all life. Everything we put on the land on Long Island percolates through to our groundwater, which is the source of our drinking water from the aquifer, and which flows into the bays and harbors, causing the algae blooms and all the other things, all the other problems we have as well. So that was a controversial decision, but it was made. And what do we have now? We don't have hundreds of thousands of acres being sprayed by airplanes that we don't control. And we don't have a lot of ecologists running around using chemicals. We have homeowners using them willingly, voluntarily in their backyard. And to give you a story about how ubiquitous this is, I want to tell you about Sylvester Manor, the educational farm on Shelter Island. They've been making really rich organic compost to restore the farmland there. They gave empty buckets to the people who bought their vegetables last summer, saying, next week, when you come back for your vegetables, bring us your food scraps. We're going to use them to make great compost. They got 8,000 pounds of food scraps. It was very successful. Well, they also need a carbon source. Leaves are a great carbon source. So the Moshoman Preserve on Shelter Island has a lot of leaves. So the Nature Conservancy was carting over the leaves on a regular basis to mix with the food scraps, but they needed more leaves because you need 2 or 3 times the amount of food waste in the carbon to make good compost. So they said, okay, we have a good idea. They invited all homeowners and landscapers on Shelter Island to bring their leaves. And you don't have to pay a dump fee. We'll take them for free, but you have to be able to look us in the eye and say, these leaves are from properties where no chemicals, no pesticides, no herbicides have been used, because they didn't want to put that back into the soil where they were growing their vegetables. They didn't get a single delivery. So surely we can do better. I mean, I walk my dog in my neighborhood, I see those yellow signs, I'm going from one side of the street to the other. Even people say, not them. You know, so that's my challenge on a personal level, is just don't use it. Let the moss come. It's green, it looks nice.
Thank you. So Paul is the head of the East Hampton Town Sustainability Committee, and he is the first, and possibly still only, all-electric landscape contractor. And I want to ask you, Paul, a couple of things. One about whether or not you feel that the Sustainability Committee is going to be able to incorporate these principles into their thinking. I'm sure they already are, to some extent, but where do you think the main challenges lie? And also, one issue that's of particular interest to most people here is the leaf blower question, because in spite of being a proponent of electric, the full story of the leaf blower has not altogether been told, which is that we should not be using leaf blowers at all, and that electric leaf blowers actually have a higher decibel. I've been told it, and actually now I need you to bust this myth if need be. Somebody told me that actually they're worse than the gas-powered ones for your ears. And so the landscaping industry keeps saying, well, we'll use electric when it's more powerful. But more powerful means more damage to the soil, more damage to the insects that you're blowing. And so it doesn't really seem like the right goal to me. So would you like to talk about that more?
Sure. Is this good? Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. And let's start with the gas blowers. Those are bad. Electric is not the best either. You're right. Should be minimizing the electric use of blowers in general. But I have not seen an electric blower that's higher in dB than a gas. So I don't think that's true. I can guarantee that's not true. If you use more than one, obviously that level exponentially gets higher. So it depends on how far they were and how many they used. And then as far as the Energy and Sustainability Committee, I think a very relevant topic now is synthetic turf being proposed for some ball fields on Stevens Sands Path. So we just submitted a letter, and we spoke up at the last work session, which was last week, about having an alternative, or more natural alternative to that, because that would be just creating a plastic dead zone in our community, and that affects not just parents, but the whole community. Not parents of athletes, but just the whole community. And then as far as how we could be more involved, I think as individuals, we have a lot of power in our consumption and our landscapes and pretty much anywhere. How we do things, question things, be involved in your community, in your own home, and then that translates to your neighborhood and then your community. And then as far as your other question was on.
No, that's
That's it?
yeah.
Okay.
That's actually good.
And then as far as our company, our whole thing is minimizing our impact, because everything we do has an impact. So we want to have more positive consequences come out of what we're doing than negative, because everything we do has a consequence. So that's minimizing organic fertilizers. Just because it's organic doesn't mean you should be putting it down all the time, 4 times a year. No. If you put in compost that you make at home, leave your leaves, then that's already doing something for the soil. And just getting away from this cookie cutter process. I think every property is unique. It's its own ecosystem, part of a bigger one. But if we treat things like that, I think we are better off.
So Paul Wagner, who is he's actually our official Perfect Earth lawn expert. But so Paul is actually available if you want lawn advice. He's available for free. What days now at Ridge Gardens?
Tuesdays, we start in, I think, the 3rd week in May. So it would be Tuesdays from 3 to 5. And realistically, it doesn't have to just be lawn. Any questions you really would have on trees, shrubs, soil, we're happy to answer whatever.
Yeah, Paul is a super expert on plant healthcare. And so Paul, here's a difficult question. So if we use really nature-based principles and we allow the earth, like the trees should drop their leaves like they do in the forest. The leaves go back to the tree. If you take the leaves away, you're taking the food right out of its mouth. And when you talk about community, when Paul talks about community, I always keep saying, all life forms, all life forms. We're all equally involved in this. But So as people get more and more adept, I hope, at working without chemicals and using the food loop and closing the loop on their properties, what remains for you to do? And what is the human role in caring for a landscape ultimately?
So that's a great question. Just to expand on what Edwina is saying is, you picture a tree in a forest, or there's a London plane tree on the lawn out here. Before Mother Nature would have put that tree there would have already been a nice duff layer of organic matter. There would have been maybe 20,000 different species of beneficial microbe in the soil to sustain that tree before Mother Nature would have placed the tree there. So we have placed the tree here, and there's lawn around it, there's no leaves around it, and basically, if we're lucky in a landscape, maybe we have 2 to 3% organic matter. If we're lucky in a landscape, maybe we have 2,000 to 3,000 species of microbes that are helping keep that plant healthy. And so the thing is, when you think about the seasonal cycle of that tree in a forest, that's what we want to do, is mimic Mother Nature. So the leaves drop in the fall, microbes, bacteria, fungi decompose the leaves. In the spring, soil temperatures warm up. Protozoa and nematodes feed on the bacteria and fungi, cycle the nutrients back to the tree, and the tree grows new leaves. That's a whole cycle that when we rake up our leaves in the fall, we've taken, and we're now starving all those microbes that are actually protecting that tree from disease in its native environment. And so what we really want to do is foster a system where we can leave the leaves. Sometimes that's not always 100% possible because handling the leaves, leaving too much, there might be lawn under it, but there are ways to manage that. And so things like shredding the leaves before or through the fall, earthworms will take it from there and mix those leaves and make them become organic matter in the soil, and again help the tree become healthy. And basically, as a tree grows or any plant grows, they go through photosynthesis. They make food for themselves. They make all this energy. About half of the energy a plant makes goes right into the soil. And basically, I always say it's like the plants have to pay taxes, except Amazon's plants. They don't pay any taxes. Everybody knows that. But when we see insects or diseases on a tree in a landscape that doesn't have all the leaf litter, doesn't have all the microbes, basically what that means is the tree was planted in a situation where it's struggling, it can't make as much food for itself, and therefore it can't pay as much taxes. The insects and diseases are just Mother Nature sending in the tax collectors. And that's basically how we look at it. And so by managing our soil biology, thinking about mimicking Mother Nature, the leaves would be there. There would be some, branches, there would be some wood, things like that, added to the soil to feed all these beneficial microbes. If we can get a little bit of that nature, a little bit of that organic matter and beneficial microbes back in the soil, we can get rid of 90% of our plant problems, our diseases and insects. And then in the case of an insect or something that can't be controlled, just by managing the soil, something like gypsy moth, what we would do is we have organic solutions for those. There are bacteria that can easily feed on something that's of that can be a very damaging insect of that type of level where it can wipe out a forest. But there's a big difference between a forest pest. That's something that may need treatment. A landscape pest is something that realistically we kind of created that problem by taking the plant out of the forest and keeping the forest ecology away from that tree. That tree right there does not know it's not in a forest. And so it doesn't have all those things that are helping keep it healthy. And that's kind of where all the landscape pests come from. In addition, when we go and treat with chemical pesticides, we're not only maybe controlling those pests, we're also killing the microbes that would help keep those trees healthy. And so there goes the, never-ending spiral of degradation. And so, we promote building your soil health, and when you do need to intervene, 95% of all things we come across, we can intervene in a way that's organic, that's non-toxic, and as Edwina knows, you can easily design and develop your landscape so you don't need to be dependent on toxins.
Thank you. So Rick is head of the Bridge Gardens, and they do not use chemicals. And if you haven't been there, I strongly recommend you go. It's a beautiful garden. And he not only keeps a garden thriving and healthy and beautiful, but it's also a garden that gets a lot of traffic. So it's a much bigger challenge than just your own backyard. So I'm just wondering, a lot of people say, I don't know where to begin. And so where do you think that, like, with all of this to think about and all of this, where do you think people find the biggest challenge in making their garden, and what are the sort of secrets to doing something really beautiful, but also earth equitable?
I'll have to think about that for a little bit. I'm trying to think, well, what was difficult I didn't find it challenging, I just started doing it. When I got to Bridge Gardens, 14 years ago, we took care of the lawns with the 5-step program, and they were mowed, sometimes the Scott, chemical program. And then as soon as the Peconic Land Trust took over, we stopped using that. And we've never fertilized our lawns or added fungicide or anything. And yet, and one of the first things I did was just buy a whole bunch of clover and go throw it all around, because I love the way clover looks in the lawn. So we just stopped using chemicals and just, and we still have beautiful lawns, but I would say, that's probably because we have such really good soil. And that makes it really easy when you have Bridgehampton Loam to do almost any kind of gardening. As you may or may not know, Bridge Gardens is owned by Peconic Land Trust, whose mission is to preserve farmland, open space, encourage people to grow their own food. And that's one of the things that we do as a representative of the Land Trust, is try to teach people how to garden, how to manage their landscapes, how to grow their own food, how to make compost, all those things that are involved. We are trying to practice what is up here. We're not perfect yet in any way, but I think every year we get better. I would say for me, maybe the biggest challenge is that neatness thing. Because I like a neat garden, and I think most people like neat gardens too. I appreciate wild nature and all that, but I don't know, I couldn't just not cut back in the wintertime. I have to, and I do that. I do less of it now, but I also do it for a practical reason, because I think it discourages voles and vole activity, and it makes it easier for predators to find the voles. And I think that's something to think about. It depends on your situation. I would say, personally, I rake less now, I edge less now. I'm letting a little bit of chaos creep into the gardens here and there. We're kind of hybrid. we don't use a lot of machinery at Bridge Gardens. We have a blower, we have a mower, and we use them occasionally. But you know, we also like to use the broom and the rake, and we find it doesn't take that much extra time to do it. I mean, it's easy for me to say because it's my full-time job. I don't work somewhere else and then go home and do it, which is more difficult. But I really think that it's, I don't know, I like doing things by hand and not using machinery. I also think it's a great way of getting exercise and staying healthy, which is another reason to garden. So, I always say that one of the great things about gardening, and what I like about gardening, is that there's so many ways to do it right. People have all different individual styles, and I think that's good. But I think one thing we should all try to do is stop using chemicals, and do more hand labor, do more physical labor, get out there and enjoy it, and learn about. I think that's the way you learn about plants, is by actually growing them. I don't know if that answered your question or not. But, yeah, it did. Okay.
Yeah. I'm ready to see, because I love the idea that you are moving away, like you're aware of the fact of the tiny thing, and you're working on it. That's great. that's it.
I don't think I will ever be where you are, but because I like a mix,
Well, it is a mix. I mean, because I don't call it, because it's people either call it messy and you call it chaos. What if you just called it complex?
Well,
That
I don't know.
change your feelings about it?
No, that's semantics, and no, it's the visual. The vegetable garden. We have a big vegetable garden. It's for display, and we grow food for the Sag Harbor Food Pantry there. And in the spring, I really like to get out there and edge the entire area. But behind it is a raspberry bed, and it's next to the fence. That's part of the wild area and I didn't edge that part. And actually, I think it looks really good to have the contrast.
Yeah, and edging is, if edging was our worst problem, we're in very good shape. Because really, I think, though, it's also the aesthetic that you're bringing to your flower beds, and how people's look. I think the flower bed designs are loosening up. That people are letting plants weave. It used to be that,
yes.
You had this, and then you had that, and then you had
Groups
that.
of three, yeah.
And now it's much more about plants holding each other up, because you don't have to then stake. You don't do as much staking or deadheading as you used to, do you?
No, not really.
So it's creeping in there. It is, because you're already, maybe you don't give yourself enough credit, because you're already aware of what the complexity means. When you look at a garden bed, you see all the interactions, you see the various life forms and how they're supporting each other, and the importance of that. I sympathize with people who don't know what they're looking at when they look at a garden, and it's much simpler for them if it's red, orange, green, and it's not all and so. But edging isn't really going to hurt anything one way or the other. It's really about just the freeing of plants to be their natural form.
Right, and not printing them into balls or other shapes.
Yeah, because it's back to that leaf eating thing. If an insect eats a leaf, it's just nibbling around the edge. If you prune a tree, you're chopping right through the wood. Then the tree has to it has to recover from a wound.
Yes.
Ouch. Yeah. So
Some trees, I'd say some plants mind it more than others. But
yeah. Just planting a thought there. So April, I'll go to the mayor next year, right here. you have a lot of people who are expressing a lot of opinions, and I'm sure you hear way more of the ones that are negative than positive, because very few people probably take time every day to call you up and tell you, I just love everything. Probably not as many as the reverse. And so just where do you see the challenges in terms of the land that you manage, the very many different business interests that are always pushing in generally the wrong direction because they're not putting the ethics of the earth ahead of their bottom line, and they're using lots of language around why that might be. But the fact is, that if we at some point have to stop gobbling up the earth. And so how do you see that figuring into the future of Sag Harbor? It's not going to be easy.
I can attest to that. It is not easy. I want to quarrel with something you just said a minute ago about the attitudes of business that I run into. I've lived in a lot of different places. I've held a lot of different senior level jobs in government. I was the state's first energy commissioner, going way back to when the energy crisis first presented itself. I've been commissioner of transportation, which puts you in the business of all of the, many of the issues we're talking about here, moving roads around and so forth. I was chairman of the Nature Conservancy here on Long Island right before we merged the two chapters. I was the chairman of the, at the time it was the largest sub-state chapter in the country, and now it's merged up even further. So I've had a lot of different angles on many of these issues. What I thought I would share with you is that where I see this modest little government fitting into all of these subjects. When the Europeans came, they completely disturbed and upset a nation of, particularly here in the Northeast, that had tribes and sub-tribes and federations and processes for conflict resolution and a whole lot of matters that sometimes still escape us, who came and pushed them out of the way and made our own version of all these things. The time we created this country, we were still working from a European model that there was always a sovereign, and the sovereign made all the rules, and the rest of us had to fit in all the way down to our life as a serf or wherever we fit. When the country was created, the sovereign states, which colonies had come to think of themselves as sovereigns in their own right, created a federation, which we now call the United States, which was a sovereign, is a sovereign, and the state of New York is the sovereign state of New York. And the other side of that coin, in all those levels that we've created, is that the real sovereign is the people, and these are just devices for carrying out the will of our collective lives, from public safety to all the other things we do collectively. In New York, the way this all sorted itself out is that there's one state of New York, that is the sovereign, representing the real sovereign, which is the people. Everything else is derivative. So way down here in this little village, we are a delegated enterprise of the sovereign state of New York. The state of New York, the counties of the state of New York, the towns and cities, and ultimately the villages. So we have sort of at the low end of this giant pyramid. But we have an extraordinary power at the village level, and that is we have among the highest, strongest land use powers of any level of government. So if you want to do something with your land in this village, you have to come and see us. We have a regulatory structure, we have boards and commissions, and public hearings, and all of the things you know in the daily life of a little government. So what I want to ask you to think about today is, given our role in all of these matters, how the matters you're talking about come to us, and where the capacity to legislate and regulate fits into what you're talking about. Because Leaf blowers is a current vogue now to be arguing about leaf blowers. My view of it is this, that the land use powers conferred on this little village are very powerful, and we don't always get it right. And one of the things we almost never get right, especially here on the South Fork right now, is how to regulate the rate of development that fits on this very large sandbar that we call Long Island. And when we don't get it right, we pay all kinds of prices. The biggest one that was presented, I was at Long Island Greenbelt yesterday, and we were talking about the power lines that come through the Greenbelt. And there's a proposal by the Long Island Power Authority through its contractor, the Public Service and Gas of New Jersey. How it is that there are utilities is another story. But why do we need to do another power line through the Greenbelt? It's very simple. Because the towns and villages of the South Fork continue to license more and more development pretty much every week of the year. And the way the law is set up in New York, the public service law in particular, in my nefarious career, I sat for some years on the Public Service Commission, which regulates electric, gas, steam, water, all of that, says that the utility, in this case the Long Island Power Authority through its subcontractor, must provide electric power to anybody that needs it. So if a developer comes along and the land use authorities here, the towns and the villages, say, sure, let's issue another 100 mega houses in, let's say, the town of Southampton this year. Well, the processes come and go, but that's a net outcome. Every year there's a gross new number. And I mean gross in both senses, maybe. And the utilities' constitutional requirement is to provide power and gas and public services. And if you look at it constitutionally, police protection and all of the rest. So all of the matters that resolve themselves all the way down to what's being regulated on your lawn or your field have as a major component how all of this fits against the larger question of how much development we as a community are willing to permit. It is my judgment, as the mayor of this very small village, that the answer to that is too much. How much we're willing? Too much. Now, that's easy to say, but in this philosophy and in this history that we have, we favor development. We're always developing, we're always growing, we're always adding, and all of that. That's fine. But if we don't do it more rationally and with more measured response to the demands it puts on the land and soil and all the rest, we have many of the problems we have right now. So, since I've been mayor, which is just about 8 months now, I've given a lot of my attention to the waterfront. One of the things I'm proudest of so far is we took down some derelict buildings on the waterfront and turned it into a park. By the way, we don't use any chemicals in that park. And this week we completed, very proud of this, we completed a walkway 8 foot wide along the edge of what we now call Steinbeck Park, and the beach just inside the bridge. And that is a fully ADA compliant walkway, and it connects under Harder Bridge, around onto Windmill Beach, and out onto Long Wharf, beautifully redone Long Wharf, credit to 2 previous mayors that did that. And then around to, back to the sidewalk, around Malloy, and all the way to the edge of the boatyard. So, and the thing about that was, the struggle was that that property had been historically a key economic component of this community. And Here we were turning it around into something else. Well, my first argument and answer to that was, it is serving a key economic component of this community because we have become a tourist and recreational and arts community that values opening the waterfront, reopening the waterfront. And in my time in state government, we did this in Corning, New York, in Seneca Falls, where we opened up along Seneca Lake, where the women's conference was held in 1848, and made that a beautiful park along the Orange Canal. In all of these places, some of the little villages in Hudson, as the old economy changed and the industrial activity didn't need to be on an open waterway, it made sense to reorient and reconfigure our waterfronts. That's what we're doing here now. And one of the benefits of stopping any further large development on this waterfront will serve many of the things that concern you. The approach we've taken in the last couple of years is to add another layer of regulation to the waterfront as to what you can and cannot do. And what we have now eliminated in the next chapters in our village development are any new residences in the water overlay district. We had a couple of condos slip in there a few years ago that upset pretty much everybody. We're not going to have any more of that. We're going to clear where we can and orient to a park, which is Steinbeck Park. And we have two buildings now in play, by the way. The 2 Main Street building, the Casa building, formerly the Superica building, and the 7-Eleven building. I'd like to see both of those gone. Now that's complicated because we have to be mindful of the businesses that are there and all of the rest. But I think at the heart of achieving all our goals, and a place like this where we, by the way, I'm the only village on the South Fork with our own sewage treatment plant. It's the envy of other villages because we can do a lot more to protect the flow into the harbor of the bay than a lot of other places. But that's 42 years old. It needs a couple of tens of millions of dollars to be updated and protected, and we want to add more parts of the community to that. So as you struggle to improve the culture and understanding of what you can and can't do on property, what you can and cannot send into the wider environment, all of those things, keep in mind that part of this battle must be, and this is where personal face-to-face interaction with all your governments, especially your local governments that have the land use power, is to bring these matters right into Village Hall, right into Town Hall, right into county government, and with our state legislators, our county legislators, and so forth, because everything you talked about here today is connected to everything else that I'm talking about. And the answer will not just be in regulation. We can issue regulations all day long. We've issued some now on leaf blowers. I can't say we're doing very well with it. My neighbor apparently is not aware. Or that Saturday is not an open day for leaf blowing. So it's a struggle to go forward. But recognize that at our heart as a community, I don't believe we can sustain ourselves in all the ways we want to over the next 10 years if we develop at the rate we've allowed ourselves to develop and in the form we've allowed ourselves to develop over the past 10 years. Thank you. You tell me, you know, when you show up at a meeting, who can say no to you? So, but the serious answer is, this is a full contact sport. And we are all, and I'm guilty of it too, good at complaining, as you pointed out. But we have to go the next step. So I would say, especially in East Hampton, we're split right down the middle. We have a dotted line. We're half. It's like having diverse parents. We have this family here and this family there. We have to answer to both towns. But the rate of growth in both those places at the town level is too high, in my judgment. And all of the ways that politics operates the answer is that's what you can do. Elect the right people, keep them on their toes, don't take no for an answer, write, yell, all those things have to happen. And we do have, I've been in public service more or less for 40 years, we have an instinct for passivity in our public lives. We get excited about this or that, but we're not as engaged as we need to be, because the number of people that complain to me about the rate of development tells me that that sentiment has to coalesce more, it has to express itself more, and we did a moratorium on the waterfront that lasted a year and a half, gave us a breather, but I can tell you it wasn't easy to do. You're standing up to development, you're standing up to real estate, you're standing up to fairly the people who are concerned that their jobs are involved if you stop development. And I'm not talking about stopping development, I'm talking about regulating it, ordering it in a form that makes better sense than what we're doing. So this week I spent time with a group of people about how we finance the upgrading of our 42-year-old sewage treatment plant. Well, it takes a lot of money. We don't have a simple answer to that. So we have to work at all of these things, and it works best when we have a fully engaged community rather than one that leaves it to others. And I think most people in this room are engaged.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask when you say development, can you just define that as what's development?
Well, in this community in the last 10 years, that has been essentially residential development, and in a secondary way, the kinds of commercial development that support a growing population. So we're seeing enormous growth in medical facilities, for example, along the highway, serving an expanding population. That's part of development as well.
Do you like that or you don't like that?
It's not a matter of liking or disliking it, it's understanding that if we are going to continue to grow at this rate, this is what it looks like. And how much of that should we want to allow? And it often expresses itself with people in terms of culture and character. In the village, the fear is that we may be losing our historic character as a small, intimate village. We compare ourselves, a lot of people who talk to me compare ourselves to East Hampton Village. Our Main Street is still a very authentic place. You can buy a stick of butter. You can go to two hardware stores on our Main Street in downtown. We're not all just now secondary or satellite stores of name brands, things like that. So when you say, do you like it or dislike it? Right now it is what it is, which is we are licensing a very high level of high-level residential development. And we are seeing the consequences of all that. And an awful lot of people are expressing concern and dislike of that. And what I'm trying to suggest here is, if that's what concerns us, then we have to tackle it. And that is not an easy thing to do. But it doesn't happen because you get this particular mayor or that particular guy. It's got to be this community, and I feel it in, say, Harbor Village, feels, and many people feel we're at a breaking point. that enough is enough. We have fewer now in Sag Harbor than 20 building lots in the entire village left, undeveloped, single properties. So what's happening? People are buying houses and knocking them down. Not everybody likes that. But that economic activity alone is what generates all the other forms of development.
Can I just jump in with one other issue? Thank you so much for, I really enjoyed listening to you. In New York State, the sovereign state, we have a very aggressive climate goal. The people who've studied this, how we're going to meet carbon neutral goals by 2040, have determined that there's no way renewable energy can do it, and that 15% at least of the emission reductions is going to have to come from improved sequestration of carbon, which means more trees grown, fewer trees cut, fewer buildings torn down and replaced. So there's that macro lens on top of all of this. And I would bet that many of the 20 lots you're talking about are fully forested and have to be cleared. Maybe not in the village, but I looked recently up in Southwold, and the lots that are available are fully treated, so they have to go. We need to be able to pay people not to sell those lands to developers. I mean, we have community preservation fund, but they're not necessarily used for that purpose. We should have a state fund for that, because it's not just us, it's everywhere. But anyway, I just think it's important to bring up that point that there's this whole level of climate change on top of all of this.
Where I thought you were going was that the underutilized device, the sequestration, all that is fine, but is energy conservation. We don't, we have seasons of energy conservation. President Carter tried it. Actually, President Nixon had a pretty strong program at one point. And these things come and go. My era at Albany, we wrote the New York State Energy Master Plan. And I sometimes brag on this, but in my time we killed 6 nuclear power plants, including 2 here in Jamesport. Now, people criticize that because, well, that's not carbon. Well, it's its own set of problems. To almost every energy debate I've ever been part of, we never fully credit the potential of energy conservation to meet goals. We were talking for a few minutes about the wind farm. The wind farm off the beach, which I don't like, not because I don't like green energy or soft energy or non-fossil fuel energy, is because it becomes another form of generation that is serving this unrestrained growth that we have here. It has to be linked to conservation. No? Sure.
I'd like to say something if I could. My name is Ernie French. I'm a professional. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ernie French. I guess somebody's controlling the vibe. I'm a professional fly fisherman. I've spent 30 years going in very shallow waters all around our coastline. And I can tell you the habitat there has become so degraded that this is too much of a feel-good meeting for me. I want to bring this right back to landscaping. And I could go on about how there's no oversight to any of this commercial landscaping that goes on all the time out here, and there's zero enforcement. You have to know there is zero enforcement of any landscaping rules out here. I watch people fertilize, use Roundup, and I'm talking about the commercial entities. Tri-R, any of them. I see them blowing the leaves. They're coating all the leaves with gasoline, and it's just totally just wiping out all the fish, all the fish nurseries that we have in the shallow water here. But the thing that is, I addressed a meeting of the East Hampton Town Board about a year ago about the racism that this whole landscaping industry is based on. the only people that are running these leaf blowers that are causing all the damage to the people who are operating them through hearing loss, through breathing loss, and also, obviously, all the habitat loss we're having, they're all Latino. We don't have to deal with their health issues in a few years. And there's not anybody in this room that would let one of their kids run one of those machines strapped to their backs for 8 hours a day like these workers are doing now. And you should all be ashamed that you're letting that happen.
Well, thank you.
They have no voices, and this is because these Latino workers, they have no voices, they're invisible to all of us. They don't earn any money, and they're all replaceable.
We are here to discuss that. It's one of the items.
And I'll tell you, I called and I worked with and talked to the Energy Sustainability Committee. And I asked them, I said, you need to outlaw these machines, and you need to outlaw these machines now. And you know what they say? Leaf blowers, they're absolutely necessary. You have to have them. And I call out Paul Munoz about this. It's bullshit. And this whole emphasis on battery-operated machines is also bullshit. Because what it tells you is that you don't have to do anything. You just keep doing exactly what you're doing, but we're going to fix it all with batteries. Well, guess where all those rare earth metals are being mined right now? They're being mined out in our oceans.
All right, so may I ask language, please?
No! No! This is not a feel-good meeting. You should all be angry. You should all leave this meeting. All right.
We are.
Go back and enjoy your dinners.
One of the things that is very important to us
This whole emphasis on batteries is bullshit.
is the fact that it is probably beyond the capacity of our local governments to manage these issues, to be at a yard, to turn, the mayor can't even get the guy next door to stop blowing. We all have to stop asking for it in our landscapes. That's what Earth Equity is about. We ourselves hold this power. And we, I hope, will walk out of here and you'll engage somebody else, because that's the way it can get done.
Thank you. I come from a culture of raising your hand, so I hope you'll accept that. Two questions, and it's a management legislative question. How hard is it, considering the fact that these new properties are going to be so expensive, why can't you mandate solar in all new building? And that's question number one. Two-part question, why can't we ban all pesticides?
I can take part two because it's easy. New York State does not allow us to ban pesticides. It can only happen at the state level. This is a law that exists in about 30 some odd states in the United States. I think we can probably guess who got it into law, but at the municipal level. Now, one thing we could do, and you could ask your, we could try, is that if a community, and I'd love for Suffolk County legislature to consider this, is ban pesticides. If they did that, it would have to go to the state, but the Suffolk County legislature is required, one of their mandates is to protect the health of the citizens of Suffolk County.
So you can't do it on a village level, is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
We're
But
not-
on
But
solar-
unless they got together and decided to do it and then have to go to court with New York State.
The way it works, we only have such powers as are delegated to us, and the state, I think, for whatever the history is, has reserved those broad environmental issues to itself. We have not been delegated the authority to regulate.
So does the same go for solar, the first part of the question?
Solar's a different,
Can you legislate solar and say new building has
we
to?
can in some respects. It's more complicated than, first we have to distinguish between solar electric and solar hot water. There was a time, when Grumman decided to go into the solar business on Long Island and failed at it. And and they hadn't failed at anything, they put guys on the moon, right? And it was trickier than it seemed to be. The law did get changed during my time, where any excess that, if you put a solar system on, that any excess that you generate had to be accepted back into the grid, so you could get paid for any excess that you created. The big problem we have in the village is the historic preservation stuff. A lot of people just don't want to see it from the street, and so one of the rules
This
that
is
came
new
up.
building, right? I'm talking about.
Just a new building?
Yeah.
We have so little that I guess I would say we haven't addressed it very well.
Would it be possible also to expand on Steve's question that you mandate, because I think that your point is extraordinarily well made, about the fact that people don't actually save energy. Nobody's, the individual, because this is really what, I'm here to talk about, like the individual making ethical choices and how that can permeate society and help you do your job. But can you also help from the other end and maybe mandate that buildings are made more energy efficient and create some kind of educational or ambitious goals for the village that we, each of us, do more to save energy?
Well, the village, and I think other villages as well, we fully incorporated into our village code, the New York State Energy Conservation Code. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you could put any level of insulation or no insulation, for example, in a building. Over time, we legislated that not only do you have to put in insulation, but it has to be a certain standard for all that. There's been a lot of that has been legislated. And buildings that are built today, residences, let's stay with for a moment, are much more energy efficient than they were in the past. That doesn't mean they're energy efficient, which is a relative measure.
Yeah, can you exceed the state? And the other thing, of course, is the other thing we're talking about is building materials that are sustainably sourced and free of all of the harmful things that go into them. Can you exceed state laws in
I
that?
think in some respects we can. I think what we essentially do is adopt the standards that the state has created.
But in most cases, they're behind the times.
That's why
They were not really aware of a lot of them. Some of these things are new. Nobody knew they would be off gassing, or they would be taken from places where nobody really looked at what it took to take them out of the earth and the kind of how that impacts the gas and the people who are doing that, and just the whole issue of the fossil fuels and the energy it takes to get them to us. And so we have moved forward on that, but we understand it's complicated and expensive. So is there a simpler way that the village could perhaps step in?
I'd say yes to all of that. Could probably be doing a better job to all of it. But I would ask you all to consider, when was the last time on television you saw your government urging you to conserve energy? We went through decades of energy crises and gas lines and all of that, and we don't readily, we don't do it in the way building codes are enforced. Great different strategies based on the degree of that can be achieved against straight conservation. I think what's happening, think about, for those of you who are old enough to remember the first energy crisis when we had gas lines and then the second one and so forth. Washington legislated new gasoline standards for automobiles, trucks, and cars, and all of that. And cars got smaller and smaller and more efficient. And now look at the fleet that's out here on the street. It is bigger, more consumptive than it has ever been. And in my time in Albany, when if I was a city commissioner and gasoline had gone to $1 a gallon, I would have been hung. Now I was in California a few weeks ago, it's $7 a gallon on the outside of Los Angeles. Where's the revolution? So we have abandoned energy conservation as a fundamental strategy in most of this discussion, in my judgment, in recent years. Senator.
There are two things that we need to think about. One is the air we breathe, and the other is the water we drink. You have in Suffolk County and all of Long Island, a sole source aquifer. We all get our water, no matter where you get public water, or you have your own well, you all get it from the same place. And right now, it's in jeopardy. So we need to think about our water quality. Because when you can't drink the water, what you have is nothing. So we think about that when you're going to put something on your grounds that's going to go down into the water system, and then we're all going to drink it. And the other thing is, Suffolk County has the worst air quality in all of New York State. Why? We all have to drive cars, so we all have to get around that way. But if we don't do things about driving less and using more efficient kinds of cars, we're also going to be breathing in all of that bad air. So our goal has got to be to preserve our county and our part of Long Island. And that's more important than that grass that grows out there. Because I don't care what you have, when you cut it, it all looks the same. And that's the truth. Okay.
My name's Dar Riley, and I want to shout as loud as that other fellow shouted, "You are the choir and you are the solution. It's us that are going to make the difference, and we are the wonderful people that are going to do this. It's absolutely fantastic. You are here, you showed up, and you are the change." I'm the co-creator of Drawdown East End and the co-creator of a program called the Carbon Crew Project. I see a few faces here of people who are familiar with that. Maybe you put your hands up in case somebody wants to ask you about the program. But what we do is we bring teams of people together with open source curriculum for 5 sessions to move to action. You create your own 5-year carbon reduction plan so that you can change your carbon footprint by 50% before 2030. And we work off the material from Drawdown and a wonderful visionary book called 2040. And we have fun. We have a great time doing this. So talk to me, talk to some other people here, and I really applaud every single one of you for doing absolutely everything you've done. Don't believe that guy.
I would like to say that one of the things that we hoped for this afternoon would be that we would have adversarial reactions, and the people who don't believe in the things that most of the people in this room believe in would have a chance to speak, and that we'd have what we hope for a civil conversation. But I don't blame that guy for being as freaked out as he is. I mean, he's seen this happen. He's seen this happen to something he loves, the fish, the aquatic life here, and why shouldn't we be flipped out? So you should speak.
Yeah, I wanted to speak out when he called out on me, but I invite adversary thoughts. But unfortunately, he stepped out before I asked him. He's a fisherman. Is his boat using fossil fuels? So he's contaminating the water as well. So I'd like to think about it. Think about what you're doing individually, and then bring your thoughts, and then bring about change. Because if you go like that to a town board work session, I guarantee you nothing is going to get done. So I understand the frustration he feels. I share it, but I can't come out and start with that, or else nothing happens.
A couple of quick questions, because I think that probably everybody in this room has something to do with lawn care, either on their own or for other people. And Paul, maybe you could expound very briefly on how we deal with leaves and that cleanup issue, getting the organic matter back into the lawn instead of using chemicals. And the second question is more about the community support for those kinds of measures. Town of East Hampton used to have a composting plant, which they decommissioned. And it seems, really unfortunate that there isn't a much broader support for that on a municipal basis. Thanks.
property, I think every property is unique in that you can minimize your input and your output. So for composting, for example, I'm sure you have enough leaves on your property to create a compost bin and your food waste, and therefore eliminate the need for bringing in plastic bags that have compost in it, or have a truck come and waste fossil fuels to bring it to your property. So I think your property has all the answers. You just gotta look at this, the way nature works and apply it. And then as far as the other question was,
relative to municipal composting.
oh, municipal composting. So as far as the committee is concerned, we're right now pursuing a grant for recycling and maybe incorporating a composting pilot program. Hopefully, we'll hear back as far as what the state decides on that. And we've been waiting since December for an answer and still waiting. I guess everybody's backed up with COVID.
You know there was a composting plant in.
There was, and unfortunately, some of the remarks we got was that it was a hazard to safety because there was glass found in the composting.
Yeah,
But to that,
problems like that.
to that I respond, you know, when we buy compost from the town, we find glass, we find plastic, so that shouldn't be a deterrent. I think it's all about getting together with the people at the recycling center, the town board, and everybody, and figuring that out.
And one of the things about recycling, because I found this out the hard way, when I was a number of years ago using town recycled compost, it seems that it was filled with herbicide because it killed my plants. And so there's no way for the town to govern that whether or not, and a lot of herbicides, especially like the pre-emergents, are time release. They're intended to sit on your lawn and kill new germinating weeds over the course of the summer. So if they get in your grass waste and you're sending your grass clippings to the dump, which I would hope you do not, we're also good here. But that you can't be sure what anybody else is doing. So if you're buying compost made with grass clippings, it's generally possibly not a very good idea. You just don't know what you're going to get. And the same with that, what Erin was talking about, like, how do you know it's been sprayed on those tree leaves? So compost at home, make your own compost, close the loop. If you can't close the loop on your own property, we are not going to close the loop on the earth.
Hi, it's really loud. I'm the young founding member of the Young Environmentalist Society at SOFO, and this week we're making pesticide-free signs for lawns. So if anybody wants one of those, please contact me or SOFO about them, and we can pick them up, or I don't know, maybe we can deliver it to you or something.
Just back to the public forum, I know land management is an important part of where we live. Montauk, which is where I live, 70% of the land is preserved. And I know that recently there's been the issue of the southern pine beetles infestation. All you have to do is drive down 114. And now there's been talk about this being potentially a problem in Napeague. So if any of the panelists want to comment on solutions, we've heard certainly that one is cutting down trees. And then I've heard some controversy around that, maybe that's not an adequate solution. So any experts want to weigh in on the southern pine beetle infestation and what we should do about that?
I'm not sure we will be able to do that much about it. I think the last time we had a winter with temperatures as cold as this one was 2013. We did get about a year reprieve from southern pine beetle at that point, but I would not expect long-term this insect to go away. Anybody familiar with turpentine beetle, which can be very destructive in and of itself? Turpentine beetle only attacks the lower 6 feet of a tree, certain trees, and it brings in a fungus that, for all intents and purposes, just clogs all the vessels and the tree dies. Southern and turpentine beetle goes through 1 generation a year. Southern pine beetle goes through 6 generations a year. So at any point in time, if you cut a tree down, you have eggs, larvae, and adults in the tree. And so what happens is basically, and the other thing is this can go from the base of the tree 30, 40 feet up the tree. So once a tree has it, the tree's going to die, and there's just no way, in my mind, to really slow this down. It's more of a forest pest where even keeping the soils really healthy will not necessarily spare the trees from the beetle. Once they emerge, they're going to find a new host.
So this means that these efforts and these tax dollars are being wasted through the cutting of the trees?
I would say yes.
Thank you.
It's important. I mean, it's important because that's what's
Yes.
going on, and we need to know that.
And not only that, damage is being done because after the trees are cut down, they're sending bulldozers in to pull them out, and oftentimes they're in wetlands. And so a lot of damage is done on the ground plane as well. If your trees are dying, let them fall. It's part of a natural succession. The southern pine beetle is a native insect.
Okay.
It's not an exotic invasive like the Asian longhorn or something like that. It could be just a natural process because all of Long Island is secondary successional, which means there's no age diversity in those forests. And nature prefers age diversity and diversity of species diversity and age diversity. It could be, in a way, a natural evolutionary process. And dead trees are great bird food. And so, other things will happen. Look at after the big forest fire in the pine gardens. It's thriving.
Yeah, I have a question for the mayor. So everything that I'm hearing here, like what most people who aren't involved in this space here, are regulations, restrictions that make total sense and are in place for a reason. But my question is, what conversations are happening at the town level as far as incentive programs for people? Like, you can only do so much to restrict and prevent people from developing things. But why not flip the narrative to incentivize people to do things certain ways? Whether it's taking care of the property that you live on, if it's all native plants on your property, can you have some kind of a property tax credit, with the town? If you have solar power, and you want to put up a building, can you do that? Because it just seems like you can't do this. The more you tell somebody you can't do something, the more they want to do something. It's like the unfortunate side of human nature. And, I'm just curious at the town level what's going on as far as incentive programs for normal people versus just big developers or across the board, if you want to respond to that.
Okay, we have developed in the village through the village makes all of its land use decisions through a series of boards. In our case, a harbor committee, a planning board, a architectural review board, and a zoning board of appeals. There's some side committees and so forth. But what has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years is that a major condition of the site review that starts with the planning board and in Waterfront District itself with the harbor committee as well, is to require that there be a landscape design and plan that is part of the application and constitutes part of the approval or the order that comes at the end of the process. We've had 2 dramatic events recently where we've seen a clear cutting of a property. In the one that seemed to have gotten everybody's attention and which the paper misreported entirely, there was a fully developed, fully reviewed, fully sanctioned landscaping plan for the redevelopment of that property. The house was going to have to be lifted for various reasons, including the fact that the foundation collapsed and so forth. The biggest tree on the property had basically engulfed the septic system. And the septic system had to be taken out and renewed and so forth. So that big tree was permitted under the review to be taken out. But what everybody seemed to have missed is that the replacement, the alternative plan, was very substantial, very expensive. And that was the way the village has begun to handle the matters of landscaping. What we don't do, though, is prescribe anything beyond the code in those plans, other than to say you have to conform with all applicable federal, state law, and so on. So I think one device we have on developed properties, and particularly on redeveloped properties, which is a very big part of our agenda in the village, is to mandate an actual landscape plan for the property that becomes part of the order under which you are allowed to proceed. And it is monitored, the code enforcement is on top of it, and if there's a failure to comply, we do not issue a CO. Our weapon is a CO.
Yeah.
And where the litigation then comes from is when we lock you down, you've spent all your money, particularly if you're a flipper or a spec builder. Now we've tied you up with no CO. You generally then go to court.
What are the towns thinking?
Where's it set up?
Yeah, are the towns thinking
No,
creatively about like pathways for people? Because I think for most people, when they think about renewable energy, they're thinking about the expense to convert to renewable energy. They're like, I can't afford this, I can't do this. So is the town are the towns proactively, I know like Energize East Hampton has a really good program, but is there actually creative thinking about, if you do this, we'll reward you this way? And that's, I think, how you get a lot of people's buy-in.
I think it's more at the state level, because if you're talking about, I completely agree with you, and it is part of the climate action plan that New York has, is that we need to make greater use of the incentives, but if you think about where it is, a lot of it is credits on your taxes, the local taxes. In some places they're very high, and credit on your local taxes would be pretty good, but like for now there is a credit at the state level if you have a conservation easement on your property. You get a credit toward your state income tax, but it's complicated because it usually does involve taxation, and so the village taxes, I don't know, are they very high?
There is more. The state has a grant program for solar. There are any number of providers now, outfits that sell these systems that work under the state program. So you can get actual dollars, and it's a significant percentage of the cost. Particularly on the East Hampton side now, there is a very generous program for funding the updating of a septic system to the IA systems. The idea there is nitrogen reduction in septic systems until we can connect to the sewage treatment. On the East Hampton side of the village, we're going to do is up to 600 connections to our sewage treatment plant and about 400 on the Southampton side. These are funded through the towns and all the way up. So those are certainly incentives in my mind, particularly for homeowners. I think that the number is up to $20,000 in some cases. The tax stuff is the trickiest. Where we are working actively with both towns is in our affordable housing initiative. We are negotiating for tax credits, tax abatement, and other devices. We're not inventing these. These have been done in other places. And affordable housing maybe is not exactly on point for today's discussion, but I can tell you from Village Life it is very much, it is a core problem we're having now, and we are using, or trying to use, as many incentives, particularly using tax devices, as the law will allow.
So we're looking at housing for all life forms. So do you think that that it would be possible for you to include a basic requirement for native plants in that landscape plan? Because
I believe that's already there in the plans that are coming. The problem probably is that unless you're doing a very substantial renovation that does involve the landscape plan, we don't get involved in landscape.
But I thought you said you were thinking about doing that.
Yeah, but that would be the logical next step.
Yeah, it would be the next one. That would be great.
I'm happy to bring a voice from the Ukraine. This morning I was on a Zoom with an ecologist, activist in the Ukraine who's making documentaries about not only what's happening to people in the Ukraine, but what's happening to nature there. Reminding me that our local questions have international implications. And Nadia, at the end of the conversation, I said, I'm going to an environmental meeting in Sag Harbor. She said, please send all of them there my love and respect.
Thank you. And on that note, how about everybody talk among themselves, approach all of us individually while you're enjoying your refreshments?
Just one question is related to the affordable housing topic that was just mentioned. So my wife and I live in Southampton, and there was an adjacent property. It was a 3.5 acre parcel, and maybe about 2 weeks ago, bulldozers showed up and they raised the entire thing. They just from the front to the back. So I called the Southampton Town Housing Authority, I guess, and I spoke with Curtis Highsmith there. And I said, so what's going on here, right? It's like, all of the neighbors were like, what's happening? He said, well, we're going to build 6 affordable houses for first-time home buyers. So, which we think is great. I mean, I grew up out here. I have plenty of high school friends who can no longer live here because they can't afford to live here. They can't move back and care for aging parents necessarily. So, but I'm just wondering now that, the trees are gone, right? So, but now who can we approach and what can we do so we can get some of what we've all been talking about here today integrated into that property, because that was a habitat, right? Squirrels, birds, you name it. And so what would you suggest?
That's being built for purchase units or rental units?
So what I was told is that they're for first-time home buyers.
Okay, that sounds like the Long Island Housing Partnership, which I founded 32 years ago, and which has done more than 2,000 units. The idea was to rebirth the American Dream Long Island version for single-family home ownership on individual lots. What we're doing in the village right now is not that. We're looking at rental properties, in many cases for either seniors who need to downsize but don't want to leave the community, or young people going out on their own for the first time. So what you need to know there, if it's Curtis, it's going to be the town of Southampton. I don't know the individual project, but if you use the word purchase, it might be a Long Island housing. In either case, the fact that there's been a demolition means that it's well along in the permitting process. So you're going to have to catch up to where that permit is. It should be readily available through the town building department. It would be if it was in the village, you'd be able to come in and get a file, look for the file and all that. So I think that's what you're seeing. We've had 2 or 3 cases in my time where people went ahead and demolished a house without permission. They say we're sovereign. The sovereign regulates what we do. The sovereign authorizes us to fine you $800 if you demolish a house without permission. That's it. I think that speaks to the power of real estate politically in the state of today.
And I think, one of the things that is apparent from this meeting and from everything we've heard is that we have to raise our voices, we have to attend village meetings, we have to write to village officials and town officials and county and government officials. And without, every single freaking time my husband turns on the TV, I hear, ask your doctor to prescribe you something that might make your hand fall off, but you think you should have it. And there is, someone had mentioned the fact that there is not enough rebuttal in terms of the way that we're receiving messages as a community, as a nation. We're receiving the wrong message, and they're all being paid for by people who really don't give a shit about our health and our environment and our communities. And I truly believe that, I want to thank all the panelists here so much because what you do on the local level counts, what you do in your property and your house counts, how you influence your friends counts, but then you do have to look past that whenever possible, especially if you feel passionate about something. Like, I can't tell you how frustrated I still am about the Hills, which is now called, what is it called, something else. So horrible. The thing that's the big developer that's taken over a large chunk of the Pine Barrens is now building on it. That's sacred land, that should not be happening. And they duped us by playing the waiting game and then letting it go forward. So it's like, if you don't stay on things constantly, this is what happens. So, we all have to find time in our busy, stressed out, pandemic, exhausted lives to get up one more time and write one more letter and tell one more neighbor and friend that we all need to join together to do something about this and to support people who are trying to do it. So anyway, now, I have to thank one more. I have to thank Tom and Levon Kellner-Rausch, who are our sponsors for this event and afforded people inexpensive or free tickets, and also Provisions Natural Food Market, who gave us the food that we're having for our snacks now, and as well as Channing Daughters Winery, who's provided some lovely wine for us. So please stay and relax and talk to people and be like-minded.
And thank you, April, for providing this.